Hello, I'm Bill Lakins and welcome to my shop. For the last month or so I've been working on the latest Wood Whisperer Guild project, the tilt top table. My table does not tilt. That's one of the options that I changed. I've got a few other options that I have changed, a few modifications, and the way I went about some of these things on here I did a different way, and Mark Spagnolo has given me permission to shoot a little video on some of the different ways that I went about making this table. And some of the options that I decided to change on it. Like one, for instance, instead of, I have more of a tool up top here. I did more hand tool work down here at the base than I really intended to, but I enjoyed it. I have my top here. As you can see, mine's made out of cherry. And I opted for the fixed top. I didn't want it to tilt top. So stay with me and you can see some of the things that I did to make this table. After cutting and planing the blank down to the proper size, that's when I had my first problem. Realized my lathe was too short. So I built an extension on the end of the bed so I could have a couple more inches. I have a video on that you can go to my YouTube site and watch. But as of now, I have the blank in the lathe turning, and I'm turning it down to the round with my roughing gouge. Here I am marking the reference points on the round blank, then I will rotate it so they will transfer all the way around. Now I'm using my parting tool and my calipers at each of the reference points to take each different section to the proper depth. I started turning the ends down, the one end where the 3 feet will go, and then the tenon for the top where it will go into the brace that connects it to the top of the table. Now I'm starting to shape the column itself, and I'm doing the majority of that with my roughing gouge, and I'm using my reference lines and my depths to mark my progress. I did the final shaping of the column using my round nose scraper. As you can see here at the top of the column, I decided to keep the little tulip shape. It just kind of turned out that way and I liked it, so I decided to keep it. And then I will be sanding the column up to 220 grit and move on to the next step. I've marked the center of my dovetail where I want to start my drill bit. Put the center point in there. Crank him down. Stay as straight as I can. Now, I've got my caliper set at a 1/2 inch. That's how deep I want to go, and I'm about halfway there. I'm perfect right there. So I'm a 1/2 inch deep. Now I'm going to take my Lee Nielsen carcass saw, start it right in the corner right there. Saw down to the bottom of the dovetail on the corner. Follow my lines as close as I can, and I have to remember to keep my saw tilted over because this is a dovetail. I'm trying not to hit the edge up there to booger that up. Alright, switch to my gent saw. I can do a little bit more with that. It's hard to get all the way down to the bottom of that hole there, but I can get pretty close. I'm inside of my line a little bit, but I can pare that back out. Okay. About as good as I'm going to get. I'm going to do my other side, then we'll come back and do some chisel. Okay, I've got those sawed down all the way here on this end, but this end's a little bit shy, but that's okay for now. I'm going to take a Lee Nielsen chisel. Start popping it out. And it doesn't take long to hog most of that out. I'm going to switch over to a little flatter chisel, start paring out the bottom a little bit. And also I'll pare these sides down just a little bit. And it doesn't take long to hog that out there. I'm about done with this one. Just a few more minutes of cleanup. But let me do that and I'll come back and show you what I'm going to do next. Okay, I've got that cleaned up pretty good. I'm going to come back with a rasp and clean up the sides a little bit. Try maintaining that angle. I can't get up in there with this rasp. But what I can do, I just took one of those little pocket rules and took the clip off of it. And I took some adhesive tape. And I can come in here, do a little bit of light sanding. And that cleans it up quite nicely. I'm going to leave the top of them rounded. When I cut my dovetails on the legs, I'll just round the tops of them and never know the difference. But so far so good. I've done 2 of these and it's about 15 minutes per dovetail. It's not bad at all. A couple more minutes to clean up and I'll do the last one. Well, I have all 3 of my dovetails cut, and that was right under an hour, about 50 minutes to get all 3 of them done. Can't saw all the way, but you can get real close. The chisel took care of the rest, and I'm real pleased. I can take my little template off now. And I'm happy. They are not the prettiest things I've ever done. I've never cut sliding dovetails by hand before, but the legs themselves will wrap over these edges. I may put it back on the lathe and return just so I can clean up this bead here a little bit. There's a couple places where I did nick it with a saw and it's hard not to, but do a little bit of hand sanding here and we call the column done. Now I can start working on the legs. I've taken the 2 pieces of the template for the leg and I'm going with the leg that swoops out. I've put some spray adhesive on some 1/2 inch MDF, a scrap I was going to throw away, but worked out perfect for this. So I'm going to trim this out on the bandsaw to start with. After sanding the template down to the line and making sure it's exactly where I want it, I tape the 3 boards together for the legs with double-sided tape, and then I use double-sided tape for the template on top. Originally I was going to use my router table, but the bit that I have was not long enough to do what I needed, so I decided just to trim it out on the bandsaw. And then I will finish shaping it with the sander. Well, I think that worked out pretty good. I wanted to use my router table, but did a pretty good job on the bandsaw. Used some 80 grit sandpaper right now to smooth everything back up. I'm not going to go any further because I still have to sand the sides later. Let's see if we can pop this apart. 3 legs. Do a little cleanup, get this tape off of here, and start working on the sliding dovetail part right here. Okay, ready to start doing the dovetails on the legs. And what I'm going to do, I've got this one marked as number 1, and that's where this one will go here. Just want to keep all these separate. I'm just going to hold my column on the leg on the back side here. Got it wrapped in an old sock so it don't skin up as much as possible. And just put that against the back of it. And I know you're not going to be able to see much right here. And get that lined up just right. And pencil in where my dovetails are. And I want to get these edges, these corners right there. Okay. Now, take this over here and actually I need to flip it over and do the other side next. 6-inch rule. And mark from where I put my mark up to that corner right there, and we'll mark it several times. And we'll flip it over, do the same thing here. I decided to do a voiceover on this section. The sound of the weed eater outside was just way too loud. I'm starting on my legs here after I have them clamped down to the bench with a hold fast. I have them marked, so I'm starting with my carcass saw, cutting the line, tilting the blade a bit to match the dovetail. And then I will use my gent saw a little bit. I can get in there a little better. And then it's taking a few chisels and chiseling down to that line. And then I finish up with a rounded rasp, and it slides up in there and gives it that curve it needs to wrap around the leg of the column. I've got all 3 of my legs fitted in there. I need to do a little bit of cleanup on the top corners, but before I do that, I'm going to put the column back in the lathe. When I was sawing for the slots, I did nick a few spots here on this bead, so I just want to re-round that bead just a little bit. And also, when I put this in the vise, even though it was wrapped up, I kind of dented it a little bit up here on this top edge. So I'm going to reshape that and reshape the bottom of the bead, and then I will touch up the tops of each leg to fit in there just a little bit better. But so far so good. I'm happy with it. Not without its problems doing it hand cut style, but like I say, I'm happy with it. Well, I'm finally back down in the shop today. I have taken a few weeks off and doing a few other little things. I've got my legs pretty much done, but I still need to taper them a bit. I'm going to get to that shortly. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and make the support for under the table. The Bell Forest kit give me this really nice thick slab of beautiful cherry here, but been thinking in the tilt top is not what I really wanted when I started, when I recommended this project to Mark, and so I'm going to go with the fixed top. And the board that came to make the 2 cleats with, I decided to use that, and I'm going to save this nice piece of cherry for something else one day. I can resaw that and make a really nice thing out of that. But what I've done, I've just cut a piece out of that. I hand planed the sides down. They were rough. That was easier than pulling out my little crappy joiner I've got. But I've got it marked center, and then I'm going to drill my hole. I used 1 3/8 inches here for my tenon because that's the bit that I had. I didn't have what was originally called for, but that's what I used. So I've got that loaded up. So let's go drill this hole. I think what I'm going to do for the ends, I think I'm just going to round them and make it kind of oval shaped, and I think that's what the look I'm going to go for. Also, this piece happened to be just dead on perfect thickness, so I'm not going to plane that down anymore. I'm going to leave it like it is so it'll fit that tenon just right. So let's go with that. Okay, I've got where I'm going to drill my holes. I'm going to put 3 screws in each end and countersink them. Okay, that fits on there. It's just a little bit loose because I went a little bit too far on my lathe that day, but I think that's going to be fine. And what I may wind up doing is do a split this tenon, put a wedge in it, and that'll spread it out. That'll make it tight when I get ready. So I still may go that route. But on the ends, I'm going to use a kind of polyurethane here as my circle. Alright, it's time to taper this leg here. What I've done, I've come and marked a mark up here where I want the taper to end. And I came in marked on either side of the tip here. And I needed to draw a line and needed a flexible ruler, and the best thing I found was an old car tag I had stuck in the corner of the shop. It molded right in the curve real well. But I'm going to taper that down, and I'm going to sit down for this job. I'm going to use my shaving horse. Made this last year and I have really enjoyed it. I just did one leg, didn't take but a few seconds, and you know, it's tapered down just right nicely. The rest of it will be a little sanding and be good to go. So this is, we used a draw knife from my great Uncle Grady that was given to me. Alright, getting down to my line. Tip here needs a little bit more. The big wide blade rides on the flat here, so it keeps it good and flat. Okay, I'm just right at my line. Now I'm going to switch over to my Lee Nielsen flat spoke shave. Go back up here to my original line, do a little more work. And just like that, I'm down to my line. It'll take but a minute or so, and flip over and do the other side. Bit of a knot there, have to watch that. Back to the spoke shave. I've been trying to use this shaving horse in a few projects, and I'm really starting to love it. I want to try to make a new axe handle on this thing. I haven't got around to that yet. Got a nice piece of hickory over here cut for it. And I also want to try to make some buckets. And I'm down to the line where I want to be. This one's done. Got one more to go. Tapers are done. I want to round over the outside edges. Could pull out the router table over here, but I got the shaving horse out and I'm just going to use my spoke shave. I'm going to come back and sand them again anyway. I'd like to hold it like this, but with this dovetail here, don't want to hold very well. So, just putting it in here, leaving the inside square, but I'm going to round over the outside. And this works quickly and easy. When I get to the tip, the grain changes, so I got to come back from the other side. Okay, turn around the other way, the top end. About it for that. Flip it over and do this side. I started at 120, 150, and now I just finished up with 220 on the random orbital sander. So now I'm just taking each of these off here and doing a little bit of light sanding on the edges. And I'm taking that tip down there and just kind of a little sanding so it don't chip out, but that is nice and smooth. Got my taper, the round over looks good, quite happy with it. Finish up with everything else here, even sanding this up to 220, and next we'll be ready for the top. After planing the 3 boards for the top, I just decided to use my hand planes to joint the edges of it. It was just quicker that way. Do a little card scraping on my joints here before I cut this top out. Scrape some of the glue out, smooth them down a bit. Okay, I was checking on my wife and we both decided we want a round top instead of the oval top. So what I've done, I'm going to go 18 inches. That will hang over the lace just right. And I'll just drill a circle to give me a basic idea. And in the center, I've drilled a 1/4 inch hole, put a little pin in here. And what I'm going to be using is my circle cutting jig for my bandsaw that I use to cut bowl blanks with. And I'll drop that pin in the number 9 hole right here, and that'll give me my 18 inches. Normally I use the Highland Woodworking wood slicer blade, but I've switched out. The Highland also makes a wood turner's blade, and it's a whole lot easier to cut curves with. So I'm going to be using that, but first I'm going to go to the bandsaw and just kind of rough cut close to my line, then I'll come back and use my jig to finish it off. sand it up to 220. Take my 220 sandpaper with all the grits. When I get through, I take it off and make do the edges. The tabletop's pretty much done. The only thing I really have left to do is good there. On the bottom, I did plug up my hole I used a while ago. I'm going to take my brace here that goes on the column. I'm going to center that up, mark my holes, and pre-drill those, and then do a little bit more sanding to smooth out that, and then the table will be ready. Mark my where I'm going to drill my pilot holes. Alright, got my pilot holes started. I'm going to pre-drill them just a little bit, and I'm going to use my egg beater drill. Try to use my hand tools as much as I can. Just makes quick work of this. Nice and quiet. Don't have to charge the batteries. Well, it's glue up time. I've already got two of my legs on here. My joinery is a little bit loose. I did these by hand, first time I've ever done it. So I've cut me a couple little cherry shims. I'm gonna glue those in there. So it'll fit nice and snug. I did just get through putting the column back on the lathe. I trimmed up this ridge right here just a little bit, and then did another sanding. Sitting around in the shop for several weeks, the column had gotten a little dusty and dirty, or grimy, I guess. I've enjoyed this project, but when I'm done, I'll be taking a break. It's getting hot in Georgia, and I don't have AC in my shop. Turn him up a little bit, put a little block there. Well, came down here this morning, did a little clean up and touch up on some of my joinery. I had to do a little sawdust and CA glue slurry in a couple of spots, sand them down, but they won't be seen. Finished touching up everything. Next I want to check for level, and I've got this glass panel out of an old storm door, and it works great for stuff like this. Put my level on it, and I need to shim it with had a steel rule here that shimmed it up just perfect, and put this up there and put my little level on it, and I noticed it was off just a little bit, so one leg I had to take down maybe 1/8 of an inch on the bottom. I just took it with my sander and hit it. Now it's perfectly level. So what I'm going to do now is attach this base for the top, and I have on my tenon, it is just a hair smaller than my hole. I guess I got a little aggressive on the sanding on the lathe. So what I've done, I've split it with the saw. And so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put a wedge in there. So let's put a little glue up here. Always have your glue ready. make a mess, but needs a little more. I'm going to put my base on and put a little glue on the wedge. Grab a mallet. Well, it's finishing time here for my table. What I'm using, I like to start with this on these kind of projects. I've got 1/3 shellac, 1/3 denatured alcohol, and 1/3 boiled linseed oil mixed up. I'm just applying with a paper towel, starting with the bottom of the top here. So I'm going to flood this on here, start with. Got my table here on some painter's pyramids, but I've got the stand over there on some blocks with nails in it. I did that a while back for a project, and I thought of taking the nails out, and I've used it so many times I just keep them because those curved legs will not stay on the painter's pyramids. I used this same finish on my shaker table a couple of years ago and really like it. But I will be putting 2 or 3 coats of this on, and that is really sucking it in. I'll let that set for a little bit. I'll flip it over, but I will probably be able to get all my coats of this on today and let it set, come back tomorrow and put my wiping varnish on. Let's put some on this column here, see how it's going to look. Oh yeah, that brings that cherry out. Well, my first coats of the boiled linseed oil, denatured alcohol, and shellac, let that set up, come back and hit it with double aught steel wool, and then I'll put a coat of my wiping varnish on, which is half mineral spirits, half polyurethane. So I've got 1 coat of that on, and I'm coming back and doing another wipe down with the 4/0 steel wool. And then I'm going to apply another coat or 2 of the wiping varnish. Here's my wiping varnish mixed up. I'm starting on the bottom of the top, getting a nice coat on there. So far the finish is done really well. Let that set a moment. Work on the columns, then I'll flip that top over. And I think 1 more coat after this and I'll be through with the finish. I'll let it set for a few days. Come back, rub it out 1 more time, and then put a coat of wax on it. I finished my 3 coats of wiping varnish. Now I'm back down here a few days later. It is set up. I've got some soapy dishwater and some 2000 grit sandpaper, and I'm just going to give it a little on the board here, just giving it a nice light wiping. I'll get rid of any little dust nibs that are left in there. And we'll do the column here too. I don't think I'll worry about that top. Finish this up and I'm going to wipe it down. And come back and wax it. Okay, after sanding with the 2000 grit soapy sandpaper, I'm applying a little wax, Renaissance wax, my favorite. I'm going to buff it out with an old piece of flannel. It's really soft. It does a good job, puts a good shine on it. Protects it. Last job of the project, final attachment, putting this top on. I went ahead and centered it, make sure it's all good to go. A little dust off of there. And we're going to call this project a wrap. Got my top on here. Nice and balanced, level. I've enjoyed this project. If you want to do this project, go to thewoodwhisperer.com. Check out his free site. And if you're really interested in this project, join the guild. He has great projects, the best video knowledge of anybody I know out there of woodworking. Does a great job. I highly recommend that you go to the Wood Whisperer and join the guild. Thank you for watching.